Have you ever felt invisible? Like you were standing right there, offering everything you had, but the world just looked past you, seeing only the uniform, the title, the perceived place you occupied? Have you ever watched someone less capable, less dedicated, simply step over you because they fit a certain mold, while you remained stuck, your potential unseen, your voice unheard? This is a story about that feeling, about the quiet strength it takes to endure it, and about what happens when the person who truly sees you finally arrives. Angela Hayes arrived in Berlin with a fire in her belly. At 32, leaving Boston felt like shedding a skin, a necessary exile to escape the predictable pathways laid out for her. She joined a large multinational firm, its German headquarters a sprawling glass and steel edifice that hummed with a different kind of energy, efficient, rigorous, hierarchical. Angela thrived initially. Her American directness, honed by years in a competitive environment, cut through some of the corporate inertia. Her strategic mind, analytical and creative in equal measure, quickly delivered tangible results in her department. Projects she managed saw increased efficiency, improved outcomes, and positive feedback from clients. She worked long hours, often the last to leave, fueled by ambition and a deep-seated desire to prove her worth, not just to the company, but to herself. Colleagues respected her. Senior managers acknowledged her contributions in team meetings, and she felt the upward trajectory pulling her forward. The first few years were a steep, exhilarating climb. She learned German, adapted to the culture, built a life for herself far from everything familiar. The city's blend of history and modernity resonated with her own journey, building something new on the foundations of the past. She envisioned a leadership role, a chance to implement larger strategic visions, to shape the future of her division. She saw opportunities the company was missing, inefficiencies that could be ironed out, markets that could be tapped. She meticulously documented her successes, prepared for performance reviews, and signaled her readiness for the next step. The company's structure, however, was rigid, and the unwritten rules often favored a different path, a different profile. The air in the office started to shift around her fourth year. The open acknowledgement of her contributions began to diminish, replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible sidelining. Projects she had initiated were reassigned or restructured in ways that minimized her lead role. Opportunities for visibility, like presenting findings to senior leadership or representing the team in cross-departmental meetings, started going elsewhere, and then came the promotions. One after another, male colleagues with less experience, less tenure, and frankly, less impressive track records, were elevated into the leadership positions she had been aiming for. The sting was sharp, a cold knot forming in her stomach each time she saw another internal announcement. It wasn't just disappointing, it felt deeply unfair. Her direct manager during this period, a man named Herr Schmidt, embodied the gatekeeping role. He was a figure of mid-level authority, cautious, bureaucratic, and seemingly threatened by Angela's initiative. He possessed a knack for diluting her ideas, for finding fault in her proposals, and, most frustratingly, for subtly taking credit for outcomes that originated from her work. His dismissive comments, delivered with a paternalistic air, chipped away at her confidence. "Angela, that's a bit too ambitious for our current framework." Or, "While your data is interesting, Angela, I think the team needs a more grounded approach," he would say, before presenting a watered-down version of her strategy as his own. The performance reviews, once promising, became exercises in carefully worded critiques that emphasized minor points for improvement while downplaying her significant achievements. She felt the walls closing in, the once clear path ahead obscured by the shadow of Herr Schmidt's skepticism and the company's ingrained biases. It was a test of endurance, a challenge to her spirit she hadn't anticipated. Every morning felt heavier, the walk into the glass tower less like an ascent and more like entering a cage. The fire that had brought her to Berlin began to flicker, threatened by the dampening effect of persistent underestimation and the cold reality of corporate politics. But beneath the frustration, a stubborn ember of defiance remained. She wouldn't be extinguished. Not yet. The frustration festered, a constant low hum beneath the surface of her professional demeanor. Angela tried the conventional routes. She scheduled meetings with Herr Schmidt, attempting to address his feedback directly, to understand his reservations. Each conversation felt like hitting a padded wall. He offered vague platitudes about fit and readiness, never engaging with the specifics of her performance or the substance of her ideas. She escalated to human resources, describing the pattern of being overlooked, the lack of clear criteria for promotions, the feeling that her contributions were being minimized. HR listened, took notes, and promised to look into it. The result was a mandated mediation session with Herr Schmidt that was more performative than productive, leaving Angela feeling even more isolated and labeled as difficult. The casual comments from some colleagues didn't help. "Oh, you're still in that role, Angela. I thought you'd have moved up by now," they'd say, oblivious to the systemic roadblocks she faced. The daily indignities accumulated. Being interrupted in meetings, having her suggestions ignored only to be praised when proposed by a male colleague minutes later, being assigned tedious tasks below her skill level. It felt like a constant effort just to maintain her position, let alone advance. The dream she had arrived with seemed to be receding, replaced by a weary resignation. She saw talented women around her facing similar challenges, some leaving the company altogether, others simply settling into quiet competence, their ambition dulled. The corporate environment, for all its outward polish, felt subtly hostile, a place where certain voices were amplified and others muted, regardless of their value. Angela considered leaving, the thought a constant temptation during sleepless nights. There were other companies, other cities, but something held her back. A deep-seated reluctance to let this be the end of her story here, to let Herr Schmidt and the system he represented win. She had invested too much, her career, her life in Berlin, her belief in her own capabilities. Running felt like an admission of defeat. She needed a different strategy, one that bypassed the layers of bureaucracy and prejudice that blocked her path. If the conventional door was locked, she would have to find a window, or maybe even build her own door. The realization settled over Angela not as a sudden epiphany, but a slow, steady burn. The system wasn't going to change for her. She had to find a way to navigate around it. Escalating through official channels had proven futile. Direct confrontation with Herr Schmidt only solidified his defensiveness. She needed to reach the people who held the real power, the ones who could see beyond the immediate hierarchy and the ingrained biases. This meant reaching the top, specifically, the German CEO. His name was Herr Müller. He was a distant figure, residing in the executive suite on the highest floor, a name on company-wide emails, occasionally seen in the lobby or at large corporate events, usually surrounded by a phalanx of senior VPs. He seemed perpetually busy, focused on high-level strategy and global market dynamics. How could a mid-level manager like Angela possibly get on his radar, let alone engage him in a meaningful way? The idea seemed audacious, perhaps even impossible, but Angela started observing. She noted his routine, the specific coffee shop he occasionally visited near the office, the industry events he attended, the themes he emphasized in his rare company addresses. She read interviews with him, studied the company's public statements, and paid close attention to the strategic priorities he outlined. She realized that while Herr Schmidt was focused on maintaining the status quo within his department, Herr Müller was grappling with larger challenges: market disruption, competitive pressures, the need for innovation. Her own strategic insights, the ones dismissed by Herr Schmidt, were precisely the kind of ideas that addressed these higher-level concerns. They weren't just departmental improvements, they were potential game-changers for the company's future. The challenge was bridging the gap between her level and his. Official channels were blocked. She needed informal ones. She started small, almost accidentally. Attending company-wide town halls, she formulated concise, insightful questions related to Herr Müller's statements. She sent internal emails, ostensibly to a wider distribution list, but structured in a way that highlighted key data points and strategic conclusions relevant to the company's top-line goals, knowing that emails to large groups were sometimes scanned by executive assistants. These were not direct pleas or complaints, they were contributions, framed as adding value to the broader corporate conversation. It was a subtle campaign, built on demonstrating value without demanding attention, providing solutions before problems were even fully articulated at the executive level. The path was uncertain, fraught with the risk of appearing presumptuous, but it was the only path she saw that bypassed the bottleneck Herr Schmidt had created. It required patience, persistence, and a quiet confidence that her ideas had merit, even if they were coming from someone overlooked in the corporate hierarchy. She started spending less energy fighting Herr Schmidt and more energy building a parallel track, one that led towards the glass-walled offices on the top floor. The informal strategy began to yield subtle results. The first sign was small, almost missed. In a large quarterly meeting where Herr Mueller was speaking, he referenced a data point, citing it as a critical indicator. Angela recognized it immediately. It was from an analysis she had done weeks ago, shared in one of her widely distributed internal emails. He didn't credit her by name, of course, but the fact that her work had penetrated the executive consciousness, even indirectly, was a significant milestone. Encouraged, Angela continued. She didn't badger or stalk Herr Mueller. That would be counterproductive. Instead, she cultivated a presence in spaces where high-level conversations occasionally occurred, like the executive lounge during specific hours, or certain industry meetups she knew he'd attend. She didn't barge into conversations, she listened, absorbed, and when a relevant topic arose where she had genuine insight, she would contribute briefly, respectfully, and knowledgeably. One afternoon, she found herself in the company cafeteria at the same time as Herr Mueller. He was getting coffee, alone for a rare moment. Taking a deep breath, Angela approached him, not with a list of grievances, but with a single, focused observation about a recent market trend that she knew impacted a key initiative he was championing. She presented it concisely, offering a novel perspective she had developed. Herr Mueller, perhaps caught off guard by the direct but professional approach, paused. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. There was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He asked a follow-up question. The brief exchange that followed was electric. Angela spoke with passion and clarity about her analysis, drawing connections Herr Mueller hadn't apparently considered. He listened intently, nodding slowly. When the conversation ended, he didn't make any promises, but he gave her a thoughtful look and said, "Interesting, Miss Hayes. Thank you for sharing that." It was a small interaction, maybe 5 minutes total, but for Angela, it felt monumental. It was the first time someone at that level had truly engaged with the substance of her thinking, unfiltered by Herr Schmidt's dismissiveness. It was a crack in the wall, a sliver of light in the long tunnel of being overlooked. She knew this wasn't a guaranteed path to success, but it was a path, and it was her path, built on the quiet confidence in her own strategic capabilities. Herr Schmidt, meanwhile, remained oblivious to her parallel efforts, still operating under the assumption that he controlled her trajectory and her visibility within the company. This created a growing sense of dramatic irony, as the gatekeeper remained unaware that the person he was trying to keep out was finding a way in through a different, higher door. The ice was broken. Following their brief cafeteria encounter, Herr Mueller's executive assistant sent Angela an unexpected email requesting a short meeting to discuss her market trend observations further. The meeting was formal but focused. Angela came prepared, not with a lengthy presentation, but with sharp data points and a clear, actionable framework derived from her analysis. She didn't complain about her position or her manager. She focused solely on the strategic opportunity her insights presented. Herr Mueller was direct, asking pointed questions, challenging her assumptions. Angela responded calmly, drawing on her deep understanding of the data and the industry landscape. She demonstrated not just analytical skill, but strategic foresight and the ability to articulate complex ideas simply. The meeting was scheduled for 30 minutes. It ran for 45. By the end, Herr Mueller seemed genuinely impressed. He thanked her again and promised to consider her input. A few weeks later, Angela received another email, this time inviting her to attend a closed-door brainstorming session with a small group of senior executives discussing the very market trend she had highlighted. This was unprecedented. The group included VPs from strategy, finance, and operations, people far above her usual sphere of influence. Angela felt a mix of exhilaration and nerves. She prepared rigorously, anticipating different angles and potential objections. In the meeting, she was initially quiet, listening to the discussion. When the opportunity arose, she spoke up, building on a point someone else had made, and offering her unique perspective, supported by data. Her contributions were concise, relevant, and clearly demonstrated a grasp of the high-level issues at play. The executives in the room turned their attention to her. They hadn't expected such depth of insight from someone at her level. Herr Mueller, chairing the meeting, subtly guided the conversation, ensuring her points were heard and discussed. It was a moment of quiet validation. Her ideas were no longer being filtered or dismissed, they were being discussed at the highest level. The dynamic was shifting. She wasn't just the overlooked manager from Department X, she was Angela Hayes, the analyst with valuable strategic insights. Word of her participation in such high-level meetings began to trickle down, causing confusion and surprise among some colleagues, and no doubt, consternation for Herr Schmidt, who was excluded from these executive sessions. The contrast between her growing influence at the top and her continued stagnant position within her department was stark and increasingly noticeable to others. As Angela's informal influence grew, so did the opportunities. Herr Mueller began involving her in other ad hoc discussions related to strategy and innovation. He valued her ability to see connections others missed and her courage to propose unconventional solutions. He saw in her the dynamism and forward-thinking approach that the company needed. These were not formal assignments or promotions yet, but invitations, requests for her input, opportunities to sit at tables she previously couldn't even access. Angela handled this delicate situation with grace. She continued to perform her regular job duties diligently, showing no outward signs of her growing access to the executive suite. She remained professional and respectful to Herr Schmidt, despite the internal tension. Her interactions with him became less about seeking validation or promotion, and more about navigating the practicalities of her day-to-day role, while her true impact was happening elsewhere. The irony was becoming increasingly pronounced. Herr Schmidt would continue to assign her tasks, critique her work based on old metrics, and talk about her future within the department in limited terms, all while Angela was contributing to discussions that would shape the entire company's future, conversations he wasn't even aware were happening. There were moments of almost comical juxtaposition. Angela sitting in a room with the CEO and VPs discussing multi-million euro investments in the morning, then returning to her desk to face Herr Schmidt's scrutiny over a minor budget line item in the afternoon. This period was challenging in its own way. It required patience and a quiet confidence, knowing her worth was recognized by the people who mattered, even if it wasn't yet reflected in her title or salary. She wasn't seeking revenge on Herr Schmidt. Her focus was on impact and recognition of her capabilities. Her journey was about proving her potential, not about tearing someone else down. But the wheels were turning, set in motion by Herr Mueller's growing trust and reliance on her insights. He was not just recognizing her talent, he was actively integrating it into the core of the company's strategic process. The hidden gem was slowly, surely, being brought into the light, bypassing the gatekeeper who had tried to keep her buried. The turning point arrived with a major new strategic initiative. Herr Mueller announced to the executive team that a critical project, one aimed at fundamentally reshaping the company's market approach, would require a dedicated task force composed of the brightest minds Regardless of their current title or department, he explicitly stated the need for fresh perspectives, people who could challenge conventional thinking. When he listed the core members of this task force, Angela Hayes's name was on the list, alongside senior directors and VPs. The announcement sent ripples through the company, especially within Angela's division. Herr Schmidt was reportedly furious, blindsided by the news. He confronted Angela, demanding to know how she had secured such a position without his knowledge or approval. Angela, calm and professional, simply stated that she had been invited by Herr Mueller based on her contributions to recent strategic discussions. She didn't elaborate, didn't gloat. Her quiet confidence in that moment was more impactful than any words of justification could have been. The project Angela was assigned to lead a crucial analytical workstream within the task force required the very strategic foresight, data analysis skills, and innovative thinking that Herr Schmidt had consistently dismissed. It was a public validation of her capabilities, a clear signal from the highest level that her insights were valued and necessary for the company's future. Within the task force, Angela thrived. Surrounded by peers who respected her input and leadership who actively sought it, she was finally operating at her full potential. Her contributions were significant, shaping the direction of the project and earning the respect of the other senior members of the task force. This project became her platform, demonstrating unequivocally to the wider organization, including those who had overlooked her, the depth of her talent and the value she brought. Herr Schmidt found himself increasingly isolated, his authority undermined not by Angela's actions, but by his own failure to recognize and nurture the talent beneath him, and by the CEO's decision to look past him. The dramatic irony peaked here. The man who sought to control Angela's career had inadvertently pushed her onto a path that bypassed his control entirely and led her to directly influence the leadership he reported to. The transformation was now complete. Angela's work on the strategic task force was highly successful, directly contributing to the company adopting a bold new direction that Herr Mueller publicly credited with her key insights. Her position was formalized. She was appointed as a senior strategy advisor to the executive board, a newly created role that placed her directly under Herr Mueller, with a mandate to provide independent strategic analysis and recommendations. This was not just a promotion, it was a fundamental restructuring of her role within the company, elevating her from a departmental manager to a key figure in the C-suite's decision-making process. Her new office was on the executive floor, a quiet space with a panoramic view of the city, a stark contrast to the open-plan bullpen she had worked in for years. Her days were now filled with high-level briefings, strategic planning sessions with the board, and discussions about the company's most critical challenges and opportunities. She was no longer just contributing, she was helping to set the agenda. And Herr Schmidt? The company structure remained, and as a long-serving mid-level manager, he still held his position. However, his influence had waned considerably. His department was now seen as less central to the company's strategic future, overshadowed by the initiatives Angela was involved in. And in a final twist of fate, due to the restructuring and the emphasis on strategic alignment, Herr Schmidt's reporting line was adjusted. He now reported directly to a senior VP who was a member of the executive board that Angela advised. The meetings where strategic priorities were set, where the direction of the company was decided, were attended by Angela, offering her insights and recommendations, while Herr Schmidt remained in his departmental silo, implementing policies and strategies that Angela had helped shape from above. He was now, effectively, operating within a framework influenced and advised upon by the person he had spent years trying to hold back. There was no public shaming, no dramatic confrontation. It was simply the natural consequence of competence being recognized and valued at the highest level, while resistance to change and inability to see talent led to stagnation. Angela had not sought revenge, but validation, and the structure of the company, under the guidance of a perceptive leader, had ultimately provided it, not just for her, but as a powerful example for others within the organization. Looking back, Angela saw the long, difficult journey not just as a personal triumph, but as a testament to the power of quiet resilience and strategic patience. She hadn't fought the system head-on in a way that would have likely led to her being pushed out. Instead, she had found a way to demonstrate her value directly to the person with the power to see it, bypassing the layers of resistance. Her story became an whispered legend within the company, an inspiration to others who felt unseen or undervalued. It showed that navigating corporate structures sometimes required unconventional approaches, that persistence could eventually wear down even the most stubborn obstacles, and that true merit, when given the right platform, could not be denied indefinitely. Herr Mueller's role was also crucial. He represented the perceptive authority figure, the leader willing to look beyond titles and conventional paths to find the talent the company needed. His willingness to listen, to take a chance on an unexpected voice, was the catalyst that transformed Angela's career and, in turn, benefited the entire organization. The experience had changed Angela. While she remained humble and focused on her work, there was a newfound confidence in her demeanor, a quiet authority that came from knowing her capabilities were not just recognized, but actively sought after. She understood now that being overlooked wasn't a reflection of her worth, but a flaw in the vision of those doing the overlooking. Her journey from the overlooked manager in the open plan office to the strategic advisor on the executive floor was a powerful illustration of how talent can exist and even flourish in the most unexpected places, waiting only for the right person to truly see it. The battle wasn't against Herr Schmidt personally, but against the inertia and bias he represented, the kind that costs companies valuable talent and stifles innovation. By proving her worth at the highest level, Angela hadn't just won a personal victory. She had sent a clear message about the importance of looking for potential in every corner of an organization, regardless of title or background. So, what does Angela Hayes' story teach us? It teaches us about the quiet power of persistence in the face of unfairness. It teaches us that sometimes the path forward isn't the obvious one, and that finding a way to showcase your true value directly to those who can appreciate it is a potent strategy. It reminds us that talent and potential exist everywhere, often hidden in plain sight, obscured by prejudice, bureaucracy, or simple busyness. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches leaders the critical importance of perception, the ability to look beyond titles and hierarchies, to listen for the quiet voices, and to actively seek out the hidden gems within their own organizations. Recognizing and empowering overlooked talent isn't just the right thing to do. It's a strategic imperative that can unlock incredible value. This is not just a story about Angela, it's a call to action for all of us. If you are the one feeling invisible, find a way to make yourself seen, not by demanding attention, but by consistently demonstrating value where it matters most. If you are in a position of authority, look harder, listen more closely, and actively seek out the potential that might be hidden in the overlooked corners of your world. Don't let valuable talent wither because you failed to see it. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who feels unseen, or someone who has the power to open doors for others. Comment below with your own experiences of being overlooked or of seeing hidden potential in someone else. Let's create a world where no valuable talent goes unseen, where worth is measured by contribution, not by title, and where every individual has the chance to rise based on their true capabilities. Remember, Angela. Remember that the view from the top is reserved for those who find a way to climb, and sometimes the most effective climb is not up the conventional ladder, but straight towards the light.